The poor will never cease from the land. Therefore I command you, saying, You shall open your hand wide to your brother, to your poor and your needy in your land. My name's Arthur, and I thank you for joining me as we share together from Deuteronomy chapter 15. God is concerned for the poor. He has constructed societies, and the way that people operate means that some people accumulate stuff, and some people, through various reasons, end up with nothing or a shortage. Because we are to be a society that loves, the characteristic of that society is that those who have give to those who do not have, seeking to redress the problem. This is a principle right throughout the Scriptures, and it is the subject of Deuteronomy chapter 15. Practical ways that the children of Israel were to address the issue of poverty in their presence, given by Moses to the children of Israel as they were about to enter the land that God promised to give them, and to establish their nation in the land. Deuteronomy chapter 15. At the end of every 7 years you shall grant a release of debts. This is the form of the release. Every creditor who has lent anything to his neighbour shall release it. He shall not require it of his neighbour or his brother, because it is called the Lord's release. Of a foreigner you may require it, but you shall give up your claim to what is owed by your brother, except when there may be no poor among you. For the Lord will greatly bless you in the land which the Lord your God is giving you to possess as an inheritance. Only if you carefully obey the voice of the Lord your God, to observe with care all these commandments which I command you today. For the Lord your God will bless you just as he promised you. You shall lend to many nations, but you shall not borrow. You shall reign over many nations, but they shall not reign over you. If there is among you a poor man of your brethren, within any of your gates in your land, which the Lord your God is giving you, you shall not harden your heart, nor shut up your hand from your poor brother, but you shall open your hand wide to him, and willingly lend him sufficient for his need, whatever he needs. Beware lest there be a wicked thought in your heart, saying, The 7th year, the year of release, is at hand, and your eye be evil against your poor brother, and you give him nothing, and he cry out to the Lord against you, and it become sin among you. You shall surely give to him, and your heart shall not be grieved when you give to him, because for this thing the Lord your God will bless you in all your works, and in all to which you put your hand. For the poor will never cease from the land. Therefore I command you, saying, You shall open your hand wide to your brother, to your poor, and to your needy in your land. If your brother, a Hebrew man or a Hebrew woman, is sold to you and serves for 6 years, then in the 7th year you shall let him go free from you. And when you send him away free from you, you shall not let him go away empty-handed. You shall supply him liberally from your flock, from your threshing floor, and from your winepress. From what the Lord your God has blessed you with, you shall give to him. You shall remember that you were a slave in the land of Egypt, and the Lord your God redeemed you. Therefore I command you this thing today. And if it happens that he says to you, I will not go away from you, because he loves you and your house, since he prospers with you, then you shall take an awl and thrust it through his ear to the door, and he shall be your servant forever. Also to your female servant you shall do likewise. It shall not seem hard to you when you send him away free from you, for he has been worth a double hired servant in serving you 6 years. Then the Lord your God will bless you in all that you do. All the firstborn males that come from your herd and your flock you shall sanctify to the Lord your God. You shall do no work with the firstborn of your herd, nor shear the firstborn of your flock. You and your household shall eat it before the Lord your God year by year, in the place which the Lord chooses. But if there is a defect in it, if it is lame or blind or has any serious defect, you shall not sacrifice it to the Lord your God. You may eat it within your gates. The unclean and the clean person alike may eat it, as if it were a gazelle or a deer. Only you shall not eat its blood. You shall pour it on the ground like water. And may the Lord bless his word to us today. So there are a few things that are fairly basic here. First of all, the responsibility is for their own nation, the people of the land, a Hebrew man who becomes your servant or your slave. Responsibility begins with the family. Paul makes this very plain when he teaches Timothy what he's to teach the church, that a man must look after those of his own household, and if he has relatives who need support, then it is his responsibility first of all. But then the responsibility for caring for the poor extends to the church, for believers who are genuinely alone and have no relatives to care for them. On this basis, when I've visited Bangladesh, it is the responsibility of the people of Bangladesh to look after the many poor who are there. I can give a little to a few, but I choose to give it primarily to those who are believers who are seeking to spread the gospel in the land, that it might be targeted, because they are my brothers, and that's where the responsibility lies. But let's go back to our passage. The point is that there will always be poor in the land. In any society, even the richest society, people get into trouble from various ways, and so you end up with poverty. In those days, there was no government program, Centrelink, to pick up the pieces. In many parts of the world today, there's no such program. It was the responsibility of the community. And that is what God is doing here. He's making some rules at the community level that they might address this problem. So the first thing that happens is that a poor person will seek to borrow something from his neighbour to help him get by. The first rule is that if you are able, you should be willing to give. And if he hasn't been able to pay back within 7 years, and was a statuted year, so every 7th year according to a particular calendar was the year of release, and any debts that were owed were cancelled at that point. In other words, a person was not ground down to the ground until they were completely overwhelmed and without hope, but they had a chance of a fresh start. They could start again after the year of release without having a great big backlog of debts against them. And it was important that a person who could lend didn't use this as a reason not to lend, but rather it was an opportunity to trust God, because God said that if you are generous to your brother, then the Lord will be generous towards you. And this generosity extended to your neighbour, his brother, a foreigner who may require it. You shall give up your claim to what is owed by your brother, except when there is no longer any claim, because God has a great future determined for this people. A future described as, you shall lend to many nations, but you shall not borrow. You shall reign over many nations, but they shall not reign over you. Now this was partially fulfilled in the time of Solomon, where Israel became the chief among the nations, and very large numbers of people. The 700 wives that Solomon had were essentially princesses from neighbouring countries, which Solomon had made a treaty of peace with. So there were many nations wanted to be friends with Israel, because Israel was a blessing to them. But it did not last. It will happen again in the future. God will bless you just as he promised you. Therefore, at an individual level, we can be generous to others, knowing that the Lord will provide for us. And the New Testament also contains examples and instructions concerning how we should treat poverty, how we should be willing to give to those who are in need.